On this Sunday night, parked on Parliament Hill. Gridlock in the nation's capital. Bad behavior from Convoy protesters.
They were demanding meals, harassing staff and volunteers.
And the next move for police. Tension in Ukraine.
There is, I think, better chance if you're prepared.
How citizens are bracing for a possible Russian invasion and the direct impact on more than 1 million Canadian families. Battered by a blizzard. Who's hardest hit by the bomb cyclone? And a battle for the ages. Nadal versus Medvedev in an epic final match at the Aussie Open.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The protest convoy is still parked on Parliament Hill tonight, although the number of trucks and people has dropped significantly from its peak yesterday. Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, has been on the Hill all weekend and reports on what the protest has accomplished and what's next. David.
Well, Chris, on Saturday, more than 10,000 people here, very noisy, but by and large peaceful. Today, only a couple of thousand, but the tone's changed. A little more testy, a little more confrontational. Businesses near Parliament Hill, including the Ontario provincial liquor stores, would not even open their doors Sunday after protesters the night before verbally and physically assaulted staff for trying to enforce the very public health rules on mask wearing and vaccine passports the protesters are here to overturn. One group of protesters harassed staff at a homeless shelter, assaulted a security guard, and stole meals that had been prepared for the homeless.
It's been super challenging for the staff. It's very discouraging. So yesterday was a very, very difficult day. We're hoping for better today.
At the National War Memorial, a protester was filmed dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier. And then, overnight, someone urinated on the memorial. Ottawa police said no arrests have been made all weekend, but they are investigating vandalism at the memorial and to police property. Protest organizers did not respond to Global News requests for interviews.
Freedom Convoy!
A faith service Sunday morning featured Pastor Henry Hildebrandt, who, last year, was found in contempt of court himself for violating public health rules.
We are so proud of you! Truckers! Truckers, you did it!
And in Texas, Donald Trump saluted the protesters.
We want those great Canadian truckers to know that we are with them all the way. They've really shown something.
And why not? Many of those on Parliament Hill are Trump's fans.
He's the best. We need him. Canada needs Trump.
So what's next? Canada's vaccine mandate for international truckers is staying in place, and in any event, Washington has imposed the very same rule. As for the other public health restrictions these protesters oppose, they are rules put in place in provincial capitals, not the national capital. In any event, the House of Commons will open for business Monday morning as planned. And though Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his family were relocated this weekend as a precautionary measure, the PM remains in the national capital region and will be back to work virtually on Monday. Meanwhile, Ottawa police and convoy organizers are negotiating the safe evacuation of all these vehicles off Parliament Hill, but will they be gone by Monday? Almost certainly they will not. Chris?
All right, David, thank you. That's David Akin in Ottawa. Now to the Ukraine, where rhetoric is ramping up over a feared Russian invasion. Today, Canada's defense minister arrived in the country as Ottawa withdrew all non-essential staff from the embassy in Kyiv. Ukraine's president doesn't believe an attack is imminent. At least that's what he's saying publicly. But as Ross Lord shows us, Anita Anand and other Western allies say intelligence shows the threat is real.
With an estimated 1.3 million Ukrainian Canadians, rallies like this one in Niagara Falls are meant to raise awareness of tensions in Ukraine. Many demonstrators fear for their relatives in their homeland.
There's no happiness, there's no joy, because you have this ominous army on the borders.
NATO is still sorting out what to do about those 100,000 Russian troops at the border, making it clear there are limits to its involvement in the event of an invasion.
We have no plans to deploy NATO combat troops to Ukraine. NATO allies have trainers there. We help them from NATO with building capacity, modernizing their defenses, including their cyber defenses.
The military response is not guaranteed because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. The Ukrainian National Federation of Canada says signaling restraint makes sense.
Saying, there's going to be no NATO forces in Ukraine may be a good thing to be saying today. But, once the first Russian bomb lands, or maybe when the first tank comes in, that may be an opportunity to change a position.
Canada is not a central player in world politics, but the government is making moves. Global Affairs Canada confirming it's temporarily pulling out non-essential staff from the Canadian embassy to Ukraine. And Defense Minister Anita Anand has arrived in Kyiv to meet with Canadian Forces personnel deployed there and with her Ukrainian counterpart. Ukrainian Canadian leaders are asking all Canadians to express support for the cause through their members of parliament. They're also raising money for a humanitarian campaign in case it's needed in the event of an invasion and bloodshed. Ross Lord, Global News.
Across Ukraine, soldiers have been handed their deployment notices, and citizens, including thousands of women, are joining the call to arms. Our Europe Bureau Chief, Gumansingh, is in Kyiv tonight.
Two sergeants, both under 30, about to be deployed to Ukraine's conflict zone in the eastern border region known as Donbass. Canadian soldiers from Operation Unifier helped train the Rapid Response Brigade members. Global News met up with the soldiers at a military museum. Raptor, that's his call sign, says this will be his fourth deployment in the region where the Ukrainian military has battled Russian-backed separatist factions since 2014. He explains at first his parents and brother worried about him, but he says now it's harder for his parents. His brother is being deployed with him in the National Guard. Maverick, again, we've agreed to use their call signs instead of their names, says he's ready. This is his first deployment. He's trained, but says he knows he can't prepare for everything. Far from any battle lines, these women in Kyiv are also bracing for a worst-case scenario. They aren't soldiers, but they want to know how to fend for themselves and their families if civil unrest hits close to home.
I was really scared. I had bad sleep at night, and I was thinking about that I need to develop plan A, plan B, and plan C.
And we all know from the history of the recent conflicts that more civilians actually die than combatants. So I think it's essential, at least to know some basics.
I remember the situation in 2014, for instance. I also had an emergency bag. I had a newborn and I had an emergency bag, and I was really scared. But now my husband is going to join territorial defense, and I'm going to have this training, and I'm going to find more information and to be more prepared.
The workshop's leader, Alexander Beletsky, says Canadians helped develop the course.
The key thing is that people should collaborate, because it's much easier to survive together in the groups than to survive as a family, as a person.
The sergeants praised the women for learning skills to protect themselves and possibly their country, if it comes to that. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, Kyiv.
The UN says almost 23 million people in Afghanistan don't have enough food, and the world needs to take immediate action. The Afghan economy has collapsed since the Taliban took control last August. The group's strict Islamic regime has not been recognized by the international community, which makes it difficult for groups to access the country that can provide aid. And as Redmond Shannon reports, the world doesn't seem to agree on how to help.
Each one of these Afghan people have sold one of their kidneys for less than $2,000. This is not new in Afghanistan, but it's becoming more common as millions face starvation. Some families even sell one child just to feed the others. Many beg in the freezing cold. Before the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in August, the country was hugely reliant on aid. After the last Western flight left, new sanctions blocked aid money from getting into Afghanistan, and $10 billion of government assets were frozen.
The Western sanctions are creating a liquidity crisis.
This past week, Norway invited Taliban delegates to Oslo to meet Western governments and aid groups. A major sticking point, the rights of women and girls.
They have to understand that we respect their traditions, but they need to understand that we also have traditions. We represent a civilization where gender equality is fundamental.
Every country has their own culture, and based on their laws, based on their religious values.
Such engagements is a sort of appeasement to a terrorist group.
Opposition groups in Afghanistan say any aid that is getting in is being controlled by the Taliban.
There has to be better oversight, there has to be better conditions. Because what we're seeing is discrimination. One community is receiving everything that's going in, but others are being deprived from it.
Norway's Prime Minister insisted the meeting was not legitimising the Taliban, but the start of a search for a solution.
And there is no way around this. You know, we have to talk to them, engage them, and present very clear expectations.
But time is running out. The UN says more than $4 billion of aid is needed this year alone. It is asking countries to authorise humanitarian exemptions to allow aid to get through.
The scale is absolutely critical right now. We're calling this a race against time. We need to get to families in very difficult, hard to reach areas.
In the search and in the wait for a compromise, as always, it is ordinary people who are suffering. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Hundreds of people took to the streets of Northern Ireland today to mark the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday.
Alexander Nash, deceased.
Relatives of the victims gathered for the annual memorial service. On this day in 1972, British soldiers fired on unarmed civil rights protesters in Londonderry. 13 people were killed, more than a dozen others were injured, one of whom died months later. It was one of the deadliest days in the conflict known as the Troubles. No one responsible for the shootings has ever been convicted. Just ahead, blackouts and frozen homes. The bomb cyclone blizzard causing misery on the East Coast. Many Atlantic Canadians are digging out today after being hit by a powerful nor'easter. Close to 20 centimeters of snow fell in downtown Halifax yesterday, but other parts of Nova Scotia were hit with as much as 40 centimeters. The heavy snow and high winds caused hundreds of power outages and poor driving conditions across the province. Now, that same storm system hit the U.S. East Coast. It has since moved on, but dangerously cold temperatures have moved in. As Jennifer Johnson reports, U.S. officials are warning people who lose electricity and heat to take precautions.
The big dig out has begun after the first blizzard of 2022 finally moved out of the New England states. The bomb cyclone brought wind gusts clocked at 134 kilometers per hour to Massachusetts' coastal communities. Waves crashed over seawalls and battered homes.
Streets officially flooded.
The National Weather Service reported Boston tied its record for the biggest single-day snowfall with 60 centimeters, 76 centimeters in the nearby town of Sharon, Massachusetts.
I'm ready for summer now.
Tens of thousands of people were left without power as temperatures fell below zero.
This is where the dangerousness sets in. You cannot have people in their homes without heat for any length of time.
Thousands of flights have been canceled or delayed for a second day. New York's busy LaGuardia Airport looked like a ghost town Sunday. The storm dumped snow in places that rarely see the white stuff, including Rehoboth, Delaware, where U.S. President Joe Biden has his summer home, and Cape Charles, Virginia.
Certainly, for me, this is enough snow for the rest of my life.
But the weekend storm was welcomed by many. Some skiers enjoyed the quiet roads. Others took part in a massive snowball fight. A couple from Rhode Island even went ahead with their outdoor wedding.
I now pronounce you husband and wife. Adam, you may kiss the bride.
Not even a blizzard, gusty winds, and bitter temperatures could stop this happy event. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
An urgent appeal during the opioid crisis. Harm reduction advocates fight to stop a new and controversial ID policy in Alberta. Next.
You're watching Global National.
Tomorrow, Alberta's top court is expected to decide whether the province can proceed with its plan to become the first jurisdiction in Canada to require anyone using a supervised consumption site to present a personal health care number. The Alberta government says the regulation is necessary to improve community safety. But as Heather Yorix-West explains, advocates fear it could keep people away from the sites, ultimately costing more lives.
On September 22nd, 2021, Ayrton Hughes became another casualty of Alberta's drug poisoning crisis.
He's just a number, he's just a statistic within this problem, but he wasn't. He was a son, he was a brother, a grandson, a nephew.
The crisis in Alberta is escalating. In 2016, there were 685 deaths. In 2019, that had grown to 800. But by 2020, overdose deaths surged to more than 1,300, with almost 1,400 in 2021, and that's only with data from the year's first 10 months.
22 will be worse than 21 if we don't change what we do. We are on a really terrible trajectory. Substances are more tainted than ever.
It's why advocates like Moms Stop the Harm had been fighting against an Alberta government plan to restrict access to supervised consumption sites. Effective January 31st, anyone using these sites will be asked to provide their personal health care number.
I really worry that that is going to discourage a large number of people that are currently going to the supervised consumption services from accessing them in the future.
A government spokesperson says despite the new rule, no user will be turned away for services for refusing to comply. Meanwhile, the overdose crisis is also prompting action from Edmonton City Council.
We need to be exploring all the options to make our communities safe, including the safe supply of pharmaceutical choices.
On Monday, Council will debate whether to pursue an exemption to the Federal Controlled Drug and Substances Act, a move that would decriminalize minor drug possession. It's already been done by Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and the province of BC. But it's not something Alberta's police chiefs support.
Drug decriminalization triggers an immediate need for structural and societal changes in areas that do not currently exist.
An Alberta All-Party Committee is currently looking into the issue of safe supply, with recommendations due by the end of April. Moms like Aya Hughes just want the dying to stop. As this crisis continues, almost 20 Canadians die every day. Heather Yorix-West, Global News, Calgary.